Hi, my name is Morna Edmondson. I'm the Artistic Director of Elektra Women's Choir. Welcome to this choral concert that is a choral setting of a really amazing book. This is The Lost Words by Robert Macfarlane and Jackie Morris, and it's a fantastic exploration of words that have been taken out of the Oxford Junior Dictionary. So in 2007, reflecting what was going on in children's literature, the Oxford Junior Dictionary, which is meant for older elementary school students, took 40 words about nature out of the Junior Dictionary in favor of words about the digital world. So cut and paste, blog, broadband, internet went in instead of fern, otter, heron, and many other words, 40 words all told. And in response to that, there was a huge outcry in the UK particularly, not against Oxford, not because the dictionary took the words out, but because the dictionary was reflecting what was happening in children's literature, and that children weren't reading about those natural things. Therefore, they probably weren't playing outside. They were inside and they were on computers too much, as we all know. So in response to that, Robert Macfarlane, a writer, and Jackie Morris, an artist, put together this incredible book, The Lost Words, a spell book. And the idea behind the book is they took 20 of the 40 words, and by writing about them and painting them and having people immerse themselves in this huge book, they would bring the words back to life. And it's just the most beautiful thing. So I'll just give you a little guide to the book in case you haven't already come across it. I've grabbed heron kind of just coincidentally. Each spell starts with it has 3 pages to it. So this one is a double spread in which the words for heron are kind of hidden, but they're there mixed in with other letters. So this 2-page spread is the absence of heron. This is heron having disappeared from children's lives. Then we get a 2-page spread, which is one of my favorite pictures in the book, the heron and Robert Macfarlane's spell. And supposedly, if we read this out loud, we bring back the word. And I find, even if I'm completely alone when I'm reading this book, I can't help reading it out loud. Let me just give you a few words so you understand the kind of wordplay that's involved in this book. Here hunts heron. Here haunts heron. Huge hinged heron, gray-winged weapon. So very pithy, and a lot of H's in those sentences and a lot of wordplay. And then we get a 2-page spread, which is the thing restored to its natural environment. It's got other things around it, and it's a beautiful, beautiful drawing of the whole thing. So I saw this book at my friend Elaine Stevens' house, and I don't know if she planted it on her coffee table for me to see, but I picked it up and I said, "What's this?" And I opened it up, and I think Acorn was the one that I first read. And I was really captivated by it. And of course, words speak to choral musicians. And so I wondered if we could set it to music. So we contacted Robert and Jackie and found out that yes, we could get the rights to set this to choral music. So it's a huge project that we've been undertaking for the last 3 years. And then I chose 10 different Canadian composers to write the spell. So each of them was going to do 2. And I was looking for people who had a sense of play, who had imagination, who loved words. And in fact, 2 of the 10 composers I contacted gasped because they already had the book. And they already had been thinking about how can I do something with these amazing words. I asked them all, get your hands on the book, send me your favorites in priority sequence. Which ones would you most like to set? And send me 5. And they all sent me their list. And then I had this fantastic day where I got to sort of look at who wanted what and how it was all going to work. And 6 of them got their first choice, and the other 4 got their second choice. So I was pretty proud about that. And then I gave them another one that was on their list, wrote to them all and said, what do you think? Let's go. And the cool thing about having 10 different people do this is each word has its own character. It's not meant to be one piece of music that's all in the same style. So then I decided, with the help of Stephen Smith, well, what should we put in the band for this thing? You know, what should the instruments be that play with this? And so we chose flute, doubling piccolo, clarinet, doubling bass clarinet. Now, piccolo and clarinet have all these amazing colors, so we had already a lot there. French horn, violin, cello, and percussion, and the percussion includes marimba. So in the concert you see what those 10 composers did with all the different colors that they could do. We have log drum is a percussion instrument, and in the otter movement, otter is accompanied only by log drum, which sounds very watery and burbly, and bass clarinet. So it's a really, really amazing sound. In ivy, we have flower pots that are pitched. You know, if you go to the store or just go out in your garden and hit your flower pot, it has a note. So these flower pots are chosen for their pitches, and that is part of the sound that's accompanying ivy. So those are the kinds of imaginative things that the composers did. And it doesn't feature piano at all. And my thinking is that someday somebody could do this in a garden, or right here where we are on a little platform overlooking a stream. That would be fantastic. In our concert, we will have actor Laura Sadiq reading each spell before we perform the musical setting of it. So that's how it unfolds. We have the reading, we have that spell, and then we go on for 20 of them. And I asked the composers to give us some thoughts on either their writing or the whole project, and here they are to tell you what they think.
What a pleasure to be involved with the Lost Words project. My two spells are Adder and Bluebell. Adder was commissioned by Francesca Turner, Bluebell with the generous support of Elizabeth and David Finch. I want to thank them, the Elektra Choir and Morna, for involving me in this. My absolute first choice was Bluebell because of the beauty of the words, all these long, long vowels with no consonants at the end, so that I was able to create something that really concentrates on the beauty of the voice. Adder, on the other hand, is very fun because of all the consonants, all the hisses, all the sibilant sounds that one associates with snakes.
In the piece for Lark, I felt the poem had such a fun vibe. The choir jumps into these birdsong rhythms, repetitions and little phrases, and the whole thing tells a story of this little bird in the form of an astronaut heading out into space, having moments of extreme joy and moments of sadness, and all the time singing in the company of these exploding suns. And how could I not want to write that piece? It was just so awesome. And I love the piece for Heather and how it put this beautiful plant in the environment of all the other plants that grow around it. And some of them have these totally fantastic names that the choir really gets to chew on. And so in my piece, you can listen for kind of a softness and a shading and these small details, just like if you crouch down in an English moor and looked at all the plants up close. And I did this by having the choir really lean on the actual sounds of the words and by layering whispering and singing.
I grew up right underneath a big old double oak tree, so I'm intimately familiar with acorns, the sounds they make when they fall from a great height, the pain they can induce when they hit you on the head, and the squirrels that live in our trees and feed off of the acorns. When it came to writing music for the spell acorn in the Lost Words, I was thinking about acorns as a tiny, very dense, magical object that when you plant it in the ground, can eventually turn into something as big as our oak trees. So in terms of how I approach this musically, the tempo starts slow, the range starts low, the music starts simple, and it gets gradually bigger and faster and accumulates energy as it goes until it turns into something quite epic. Magpies are one of my favorite birds, even though most of my life I haven't gotten to live with them. I live in Ontario where we don't have any, but for a few years I lived in Edmonton. And the magpies that would come and join me in the backyard in the summer kind of felt like my friends. I love the raucous, intense sounds that these birds make. And so I tried to capture that in writing for the choir. You'll hear that I didn't give the choir a lot of specific notes. Rather, they're swooping around and creating these kind of dissonant, even atonal sounds that remind me of the raucousness of these birds. They're supported by instruments also making raucous sounds. For example, the clarinet is playing multiphonics, which sometimes can be a very harsh, very much non-traditional sound that a clarinet can make.
When I first read The Lost Words, I was immediately drawn to Heron and how beautifully it captured the majesty, tranquility, and power of this beautiful bird. The poem itself is also quite clever in its use of wordplay, alliteration, and rhythm, which was a lot of fun to play with musically. When listening to this work, you'll hear 3 distinct sections: The Hunt of the Heron, Serene Stillness, and Heron's Flight. Although Ivy is one of the shorter spells in this collection, I was drawn in by its very playful tone and the way it personifies Ivy itself. You'll hear this come across in the music, in interweaving lines in the accompaniment, glissandi in the choir, and how the music as a whole moves up and up and up right to the end of the work.
Newt is a dialogue between a newt, a salamander-like animal, and a coot, an aquatic bird. Both animals have peculiar ways of moving, which the music attempts to portray. Because the coot has lobed rather than webbed feet, it has to paddle very hard to get anywhere. And you'll hear the violin and cello playing lots of effortful 16th notes in imitation of that. Newts have 4 flat limbs and a long, broad tail, so they swim quite well. But on land, they tend to move in a rather herky-jerky fashion, with moments of wild flailing alternating with total motionlessness. I chose the piccolo and bass clarinet to depict that. Starlings are very gregarious birds, and they congregate in flocks called murmurations, which sometimes contain upwards of 1 million individuals. The way these large flocks sound when they're chattering and chirping away, and the way they move when a huge cloud of them is flying through the sky, were the 2 elements that inspired my setting of the starling spell.
What attracted me to The Lost Words? Well, my father, a few months prior to talking about the project with Morna, my father had texted me really all excited and told me to check out this author he had heard on CBC. They had read excerpts of the book on a program he was listening to, and he said, "Look, I know you're always looking for poetry, for text sitting. You've got to check this one out." And sure enough, I bought a couple of copies, one for myself, one for one of my lyricists, saying, "Look, this is a really cool style. I'm not saying I want you to write in this style, but I know you're going to enjoy it. I know your kids are going to enjoy it. This is a great book." And then, lo and behold, a few months later, I sit down with Morna and she says, "I have a project. Do you know The Lost Words?" And I go, "Oh, The Lost Words!" So I was sold as soon as she said it. Specifically, I wanted to work with any of the little energetic poetries because I just like writing really energetic, upbeat stuff. So the Kingfisher was kind of a no-brainer. There's a lot of wordplay with the texture of Kingfisher, Zingfisher kind of stuff that's going on in there. It gives me the opportunity to create fun, energetic little textures. And it's got enough variety in the piece that we can slow down towards the end, kind of getting the Greek mythology name kind of dignified version of the Kingfisher, but he's a fast little bugger, so we gotta finish with a bit of speed there. So that's my jam right there.
In Bramble, I love the transformation that happens from the beginning of the poem to the end of it. So Bramble starts out as kind of this menacing, almost sinister force, but by the end it's revealed to be much more benevolent, and it grows blackberries for us. And you will hear that transformation in the music. That's sort of what I built the whole piece around. For me, Dandelion kind of encapsulates this whole project, this whole book of spells, because it's really about using words and specifically names to bring this natural object into existence. The first half of the poem sort of celebrates these old colloquial names that dandelions used to be called, and the second half proposes new names. So again, there's an element of transformation in the music from kind of celebratory at the beginning to maybe more gently playful at the end. Almost like you're just trying to gently coax these new words into existence.
It has been both a pleasure and an honor to be involved in Elektra's Lost Words project. With my first contribution, Fern, I felt challenged to take the poet's active words like rolling, unfolding, flaring, and attempt to translate them in a very direct musical way. In fact, even the score visually resembles the unfurling of a fern. You'll first hear and see a flautist and violinist tightly weaving microtonally around the note F. Yes, an F, a very obvious starting pitch for our fern, as they initiate the development of this very short work. I fell in love with the second poem, Conquer, because to me, it read like a nature-based fairy tale. The young reader asks a cabinet maker, the king, and an engineer whether they are able to construct a conquer. Each character clearly has his or her own music, along with the different sounds of conquers falling on hard and soft surfaces, sounds made by the singers as well as little percussion instruments. There are lots of tiny musical snippets from Handel to John Lennon, which you might recognize if you don't blink. Hope you enjoy it.
Hi everyone. My two spells are Raven and Wren, and what a privilege to write these two pieces for Elektra and with this wonderful group of composers. I felt pretty lucky to have these two pieces available to me actually, because they really spoke to me visually. Raven, of course, for me is always inexorably linked to Edgar Allan Poe and somewhat to Hitchcock, and as a former film composer, I just love the visual element. I can imagine these scrapey talons and the squawk of this bird, and you'll see that the cello is really taking the part of the raven in that particular piece. In my second piece, Wren, I was lucky to find a brilliant video on YouTube of two wrens in flight, sort of chasing each other through the forest. And you'll notice that in my piece, which concludes the entire work, that the raven and wren are portrayed by the flute and the clarinet, also chasing each other throughout the composition. I hope you enjoy Raven and Wren.
Otter was very fun to set to music because the text is very playful and sort of sneaky, just like an otter. And I orchestrated it for bass clarinet and log drum. And the log drum has sort of a woodsy, percussive feel to it, which I think adds to the atmosphere of the piece. With Willow, the poetry is very mysterious and kind of evocative, partly because it's set as a call and response with a willow tree. And I found it very sort of romantic and like I said, mysterious to set because of that.
This project would not have been possible without many, many supporters, including the Canada Council for the Arts, the BC Arts Council, BC Gaming, the City of Vancouver, the SOCAN Foundation, Martha Lou Henley Charitable Foundation, and the Somerset Foundation. And then we had 20 amazing individuals who each sponsored a spell. And for some of them, the word that they chose has a family history, has a family story for them. And that makes it even more special. I particularly want to thank all the Elektra singers who have learned this piece with such enthusiasm, all the players, and especially Stephen Smith, who immediately caught what this project could be. He's one of our composers, but he's also our pianist and my collaborator, and I appreciate his input so much. I hope you enjoy this performance. It's about 85 minutes long without intermission. The last spell is Wren, And if you could hold your applause at the end of Wren, we'll just let there be a little bit of time to signal the end of the concert. Enjoy.